Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I am Gaurav, a student of final year bachelor's of physiotherapy. I hope you all are doing well. So after many days I am making a video in which I am going to explain a particular topic. So all the best to me. Today we are going to talk about ICF, that is International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health. So why we as a physiotherapy student need to know about this ICF model? As we all know, in our exams we have to write about ICF of different conditions. Many students find ICF bit difficult, but trust me, it is very easy until you watch this video till the end. So starting with components of ICF, basically there are three components, that is body structure and function, activities and participation, and lastly environment. So these three are the components. You don't need to focus on these components because it is a bit confusing. You just learn how to represent ICF and all these components will be covered side by side in that only. So I'm going to explain how you have to write your ICF model. So from here, listen carefully. You have to keep these five things in mind, that is structural impairment, functional impairment, activity limitations, participation restrictions and contextual factors. So these are the five elements which are important for you. That is structural impairment, functional impairment, activity limitations, participation restrictions and contextual factors. Okay. Starting with structural impairment, what actually this structural impairment means? Structural impairment means what all structures are impaired in that specific condition. Let's say for example, we'll take example of fracture. So in fracture, there is break in continuity of bone. So that is only the structural impairment in fracture. Talking about other examples, let's say for example in case of stroke, what will be the structural impairment? In stroke, there may be rupture of a specific artery. Let's say for example rupture of middle cerebral artery. So that will be one of the structural impairment. Other structural impairments in stroke we can say like there will be hemorrhage. If there is rupture of artery, then there will be hemorrhage. Also in case of stroke, there are ischemic changes seen in the brain cortex. So ischemic changes in the cerebral cortex is one of the structural impairment. So you just need to know about the condition and writing structural impairment will be easy for you. So how the structural impairment is represented in ICF model? So for this you have to make three columns. In first column you have to write about structural impairment. Secondly you have to write about clinical reasoning, and lastly about the source. So first of all, in the structural impairment you have to write what all structures are impaired. So as we discussed, in stroke we have to write about the hemorrhage, rupture of the artery or ischemic changes. In the clinical reasoning you have to write that how the structural impairments are caused. So clinical reasoning in case of stroke will be lack of blood supply to the cerebral cortex. And lastly, talking about the source, in the source you have to write that how you come to know that yes, these all structures are impaired. So in source you have to write about all the radiological findings or the investigations by which you came to know that yes, these structures are impaired. So here we are talking about stroke now. So in stroke we can say that MRI will be supportive finding or else CT scan will be supportive findings. Means by looking at MRI report you came to know that yes, there are ischemic changes in the cerebral cortex. So this was all about the structural impairments. So let me revise for you. In structural impairment you have to make three columns. In first column you have to write structural impairment, clinical reasoning and source. In the structural impairment, write about what all structures are impaired. Then clinical reasoning, you have to write about why these all structures are impaired. And in the source, you have to write the supportive findings such as MRI, X-ray, CT scan, all these things. Now talking about the functional impairment, you have to represent functional impairment similar to the structural impairment only. Now in functional impairment, you have to write what all functions are impaired. Again, you have to make three columns: functional impairment, clinical reasoning and source. This functional impairment is important for us as a physiotherapist because we are more concerned about treating these functional impairments. The structures which are impaired are treated by the medical professionals, MBBS doctors or surgeons. So we'll take example in functional impairment, for example in stroke. So we'll keep this all with the aspect of stroke only. Okay. So what all functions can be impaired in case of stroke? First and foremost, we can see there is facial deviation. Then there may be weakness in the muscles. Let's say for example patient is suffering from MCS stroke, then upper extremity weakness will be more than lower extremity weakness. So facial deviation, muscle weakness, then disruption in the ADLs of the patient. Then initially the patient will be having abnormal muscle tone, that is the patient may be having flaccidity or else patient may be having spasticity. Then due to weakness patient will be having impaired range of motion. So all these things comes under functional impairments. So there are some common functional impairment for the neuro patients, common functional impairment for the ortho patients. So I will share different structural impairments and functional impairments which are seen in different conditions on my Telegram channel. Actually I have already already shared, you can check it out. So you will have more clear idea what all are the common structural impairments and what all are the common functional impairments. So for the functional impairments, again you have to make 3 columns. In first column you have to write functional impairment, clinical reasoning and source. For example, in functional impairment you had written about spasticity, then its clinical reasoning will be due to upper motor neuron lesion, and in the source you can write about the assessment of muscle tone. So this was about structural impairments and functional impairments. Now we'll discuss about activity limitations and participation restrictions. So you have to think logically what all activities can be limited in a stroke patient. So in stroke patient you can say that activities such as standing up, walking, then toileting activities, then all his day-to-day activities such as grooming activities, dressing, bathing, then combing hairs, all these activities can be limited. So you just have to write that only in the activity limitations. So you have to write like this, that is difficulty in walking, difficulty in standing, difficulty in toileting activities, difficulty in grooming activities. So these all are the activity limitations. Talking about participation restrictions, what all participations are restricted due to his underlying condition. For example, if a patient is a old man and he is sustained with stroke, then what all participations will be restricted. So if he is going to a temple, then he will not be able to go to temple independently. So that is one of his participation restrictions. Also, he will be not able to attend a social gathering. All this will be his participation restriction. So activity limitations and participation restrictions are easy. You just have to think logically. Again, there are common activity limitations and participation restrictions. So I have shared it. You can check them out in my Telegram channel. Link I have given in the description below. Now talking about contextual factors, in contextual factors you have to keep 2 things in your mind, that is personal factors and environmental factors. In these personal and environmental factors, there are facilitators and barriers. Facilitators means what all things which can facilitate the prognosis of the patient, and barriers means what all things which can hamper in the prognosis of the patient. So I will be discussing some common contextual factors. So now in personal factors, in personal facilitators specifically, you can say that patient will be having good socioeconomic status, then patient's family may be supportive, patient may be showing active participation in his recovery. So all these are the factors which can facilitate the patient for his good prognosis. Then personal barriers, similarly the patient may not have good socio-economic status, so he can't afford the treatment. So that may be one of the personal barrier. Also patient's family may not be supportive. So these all are the facilitators and barriers which are at the personal level. Now talking about environmental factors, what all factors which are there in the environment which can help in good prognosis of the patient or else which can hamper the patient's prognosis. Now talking about the positive aspects, that are the environmental facilitators. So one of the environmental facilitator may be that patient may have his house near to the physiotherapy OPD. So you can write that distance between the patient's house and OPD is less. Also in case of some cardiorespiratory conditions, we can say that patient's house is well ventilated. So it is one of the environmental facilitator. Now talking about environmental barrier, one of the environmental barrier may be that key road conditions are not suitable. So this can hamper in the prognosis. For example, if the patient is having fracture and he is coming by a auto rickshaw and the condition of road is not that good, then it can lead to a bad prognosis. Also in some of the cardiorespiratory cases, having pet animals in the house is one of the barrier which can hamper in the prognosis of the patient. Again, you just have to think logically and see what all will be the facilitators and what all will be the barriers. I hope you just have got a basic idea about ICF. To know more, I will request you to check out my Telegram channel, because there I have shared ICF of about 40 to 45 conditions which will definitely help you. So that was all from the video. I hope you will find this video beneficial. If you are new to the channel and watching me for first time, then please consider subscribing. Also do hit the like button. Do follow me on Instagram as well as on Telegram. Till then, meet you soon in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.